Yes, we're live.
Okay.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Great.
So we wait a couple of minutes and then we start, just for a bit of time for everyone to join. Okay, so hello everyone, welcome. This is our first and hopefully not the last in a series of Fashion Open Studio events at London Fashion Week. And these events are in partnership with Mercedes-Benz and they're supported by Mayor of London. We are really happy and proud to have today with us Marta Marquez and Almeida, the founders of Marques'Almeida. And they will discuss with Ursula De Castro and Tamsin Blanchard the launch of their Marques'Almeida Foundation, the first issue of their see-through, is that publication or fanzine? I don't know how you call it, but let's say publication. And then the most importantly, the Marques'Almeida Environmental and Social Responsibility Manifesto. So I leave it to Ursula now to introduce the call. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a really long time fan of Marques'Almeida, so it's a huge pleasure for me to introduce them today, Paolo and Marta. And it's an amazing, I'm incredibly proud that, you know, our journeys have joined and we have the opportunity to share. Sorry? So I've just watched your beautiful film, the dance film, which is incredible, and have been scrolling through your recent work and, you know, reading through your manifesto and your commitments. And I just love it when creativity becomes so tangible for the use and for the good of a much wider cause. And I love the way that you've made it exactly that. You know, it's very creative and incredibly beautiful, but in your manifesto, you really talk about things that can happen, that you're doing, and you're quantifying the impact that will have on your journey and on your community and on everybody else that loves your clothes, will buy your clothes. And I'm just delighted to be welcoming you here, and I'm introducing you straight to Tamsin, who will delve deeper with questions. And frankly, all I want to do today is listen. I used to come and watch your catwalk and just admire your clothing, and I can't believe, I've always found them full of substance, and I can't believe how much substance you're putting behind your new work. So I'm more of a fan than ever and more eager than ever just to sit here and enjoy the show. So Tamsin, over to you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Ursula. Yeah, I completely echo Ursula's sentiment here. Yeah, we're big Marques'Almeida fans. So I was absolutely overjoyed last London Fashion Week in June, I think it was, when we were all just coming out of lockdown, to see the incredible project that you've done with Remade and the film that you showed, and was kind of blown away by it. And so I'm really thrilled that we are now having this conversation and that you've gone so much further, and that we can have a chat about how you have made a really massive shift in your business. So really, I wanted to start by asking you the question that you've put to your community in your new publication, See Through, which is who are you and what's important to you right now?
really difficult question, and I feel bad that we asked people that.
Yeah, throwing it back at you now.
Yeah, exactly. That was at some point discussion whether we should have done a contribution or not, and we kind of backed out of it. So we're being put on the spot now. I think we're the designers behind Marques'Almeida label. We're parents. We're kind of. I think what's important to us right now is, I think family sums it up, because actually a lot of the things we do in our work and our mission come through the motivation of having a family and having our daughters and seeing them grow in a better world.
I guess I've been working in fashion for quite a few years now. It's just that it feels that we have a responsibility of making sure that the future of our daughters will be a bit better through the eyes of fashion, if that's the tool we have.
Exactly.
So then,
that's what's important.
Yeah, perfect. So just to kind of scroll back a little bit to really when you first started Marques'Almeida, which was back in 2011, is that right? At Fashion East.
Yeah.
So how have things changed since then? And you're now established business owners. How do you feel your relationship with the industry has changed over that time?
I don't believe in the word established in a way.
No, it feels not. It doesn't feel like.
I'm sorry, but it's true.
It's not like you ever know everything. It's just like since we finished the MA, we thought, okay, we did the MA, it's done. But there's still so much more that you still have to learn, and every collection that you do, you're just learning more and more and more. And
I think the biggest thing that's changed though, it's like we slowly started realizing the impact we had, and I think I'd say if I look at us now and I look at us then, we're very not in touch with that side. And then being in industry and leaving this experience, you become a bit like we've become a bit critical of the industry from the inside, from a lot of things, whereas maybe in the beginning we were just very fascinated by it. So we started kind of understanding. I mean, we've never been a really big fans of kind of fantasy and fashion, that whole side of it, and it exists for a reason, and I think it's very important for a lot of people, but it was not our thing. And we evolved into thinking that actually it's much more important, the kind of human side, the caring side of this industry, that sometimes it really lacks. And I think it's changed because we started seeing things on the inside and just realizing there were things we just had to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem, which is very different from what we felt when we first started. And it's all kind of fascinating and overwhelming. You're just kind of finding out.
Perhaps though the problems have grown a little as you've progressed also during your time.
True, it's not just us. The whole kind of scheme of things changed a bit, and I'm glad it did, because it raised awareness on a lot of things that maybe weren't so much there 10 years ago.
Yeah. I do feel though that community has always been really key to what you've done. And also, there's always been a really strong relationship with your casting. You've involved your models very much as personalities. They weren't just kind of, clothes horses.
Yeah.
I think that was
the first thing, wasn't it?
That was the very first thing
moment.
And I think it was something that Marcus was pioneering when we started doing it, and I just think that it was such an amazing process to go through and to go and find get to meet these girls and get to know them really well, instead of just actually trying to do a casting that would be, okay, let's make sure there's a place for a black girl, there's an Asian girl. Just like, it's so much more important to know, to represent everyone in terms of personality, in terms of attitude,
and diversity.
I
think we just sat through many castings where, in the first few seasons where you see 300 models and they go around. We had this like really weird one. We used to work and live in the same space when we first started. We had a little bit tied up in a corner, and we would do castings till very late. And at some point, like I think we're both in bed probably, and someone rang the bell at like 12:30 and saying like, I'm gonna come for casting. And it was just this. I think she was maybe like 17-year-old. She didn't know you know,
she didn't know how to go around London, and she was just literally
Exactly.
lost to the next casting. She thought it was our casting, but we
and her phone had died, so she just come up and we sat down a bit and we talked about it, and she, you know, she charged her phone, and then eventually she found her way up to her next casting up the road or whatever it was. But it was just a moment of like, you know, and she phoned her agency. There must be a different way of doing this. I think at the point she phoned her agency and he's like, you know, it's 1:30 in the morning. Do I really have to do this? And I say, yeah, you have to go. And it was just kind of this moment, like there really has to be a different way of doing this because this feels wrong. And that's why I say like this is the kind of first step where we started becoming a bit critical at some of the things that go on. And then, you know, slowly.
I think it was how we realized that it is important to question the system.
Yeah.
A lot of times, because even when there's a lot of things that you think that are really well intentioned, it doesn't mean that they are actually positive, and you have a lot of unintended consequences, sort of thing.
So it kind of, the whole MA girls started like that, and you know, it's now MA boys, non-gender specific. You know, it's just become a bigger and bigger family, which has been amazing because they're, you know, they're incredible. They, you know, there's this young generation of like artists and journalists and musicians, or like biologists.
With their struggles.
With their struggles, and we were really just kind of like found ourselves looking forward to castings and looking forward to, you know, those 3-4 times a year or whatever it was that we got to see them and hang out. And some of them we had relationships from forever, some of them we knew recently. It really enriched us, I think.
Yeah. And Maria, would you mind just sharing the screen and we can scroll through a little this rather lovely publication.
It's kind of our community a bit, just from just the MA girls to just the general family.
Yeah. So why are you highlighting, you've gone beyond looking at the models and you're really highlighting the whole kind of Marques'Almeida ecosystem, including the people that make your clothes.
Yes.
Why have you made that move?
I think what we felt when we started this at the first meeting,
and it happened a lot with the remade video as well.
Yeah, to just showcase. That was one of the ideas with Remade. It's true. It was not just about the kind of product side of it. It was also about the fact that you could only have done Remade and that collection based on this kind of network of local manufacturers, of people that we've known for over 10 years that, you know, were trying to make this like really weird thing of patchworking 20 different fabrics together. And, you know, it started there, I think, by understanding that there needs to be, they need to be more seen.
And it was a lot to do with the understanding of we were creating for a long time this idea of the MA girl and all the models that we have been working with, like we just said, all these young guys and girls that are artists, designers, and we just thought that it's not just them. We also have all the manufacturers, suppliers, and friends supporters. I mean, there was one nice man that once I was working for a craftsmanship person, and I went to a fair market sort of thing and just asked a random person if he would know where I could do this sort of rug sort of thing, and it became like, again, one of these members of the network.
Like this connection. And I think what we realized when we started thinking about it is that not only these people need to be seen, but they need to see each other. And I think that was the thing that we really kind of thought it was powerful with this, is you have to put these people, we wanted to put these people next to each other. And if you see the pages, like a lot of times you'd have, you know, people from our Portuguese community, people from our London community, very kind of different in their roles in fashion. But I think the important thing is that people see each other and understand each other and understand their vulnerabilities and their strengths.
And because it's what we believe, that all this group of people, they're helping us to make fashion sustainable.
Yeah, it's this kind of sense of community. And it's amazing if you think like, you know, Donna Alice, which is one of the women in the pictures, she's our sewing teacher from, you know, lives in the countryside in Portugal. It's amazing if she sees Merv, who's this young black boy living in Paris wanting to be a stylist, or, you know, if Ruth Chapman sees Frankie, who's one of our MA girls, young, in how she struggled with lockdown, and how she sees that Felipe, actually on the screen now, who's our bag manufacturer that inherited our factory from her dad. And, you know, if these people see each other, we think that's quite a lot, you know, really see each other and really understand.
Because it has a lot to do with the social side, for example, knowing that Felipe has a factory that was inherited by the our father, it's so important to have all this understanding of where we are producing, how we are producing, and
Who's
to
involved
tell
in
the
it.
story, how it works really.
Okay, great. And it seems in a time when sustainability is such a buzzword and so many brands are using it without actually carrying through on their claims, what's standing out to me is you really seem to be doing the work. You've launched a manifesto which outlines your environmental and social responsibility aims and targets, and you're making it public and really putting yourselves out there, so you can be accountable to your community. Yeah. Which I totally congratulate you on. Can you tell me about what made you rethink how you're working and doing business?
There's two sides of it. I mean, first of all, we have to address how this whole thing started. It was in the back of our minds for a while that, there was never enough time when you're in the hamster wheel of fashion to, to deal with it, because there's always something else. And lockdown gave us a sense of like there was nothing to lose on one hand, but also a lot to lose, because you were really kind of awakened to the, to the dangers of these things and the severity of the problem. And that was kind of liberating in a sense. And that's why we started with Remade, because it was very much, because I think what we struggled with is this whole process of understanding how you can become a sustainable brand is a minefield.
Yeah.
It's really overwhelming. I mean, maybe we still think maybe somewhere someone holds the perfect answer for that, but for us it was a minefield, wasn't it?
Because basically as soon as we started doing this, it's like, okay, let's find what's a sustainable fabric and what's a sustainable product, and then there's just so much to it that you really need to dig in to have a good understanding, because there's things that
there's lots of things that you kind of stumble through when you start doing it. And then like you were saying, like there's this thing of using sustainability as a buzzword, and you see it everywhere. It's like, the message of big brands or brands that are doing it's very well marketed is, look how amazing we're doing this, look, we're doing this is so great. And I think, and that's scary, because then like as this young brand, you're like, going through your papers and your online research saying like, how is this perfect? What's the good way of doing this? And I think what we've figured out during lockdown and now is just do something. And it's not going to be correct, probably. It's not going to be 100% perfect. And I think that's our main lesson. Just, put it out there, because it's, it's what's important to you, and then you're going to be accountable, and probably someone's going to correct you and you're going to learn from it.
Yeah, it just feels like it's really important for you to keep studying what's sustainable, because what you believe that today is the most sustainable thing actually might have such a insane impact that you have no idea. And it's just really important to keep yourself very updated about it.
So that's how we started. I mean, it was this whole idea of like, okay, it's the great time to do it. Let's start with Remade. Remade was waste. So, it was there. We could see it. There was nothing that we could go wrong there. If we used that to make something that was, meaningful, and we could reuse it, and it was not going to go into a landfill, that was very obvious that we couldn't go wrong there. So we started that as a learning process, and then went on to the manifesto in the sense of saying, okay, there's no going back now that we started. We can't go back.
So when you talk about waste, that was your own waste that you built up over the past 9 years.
It's shocking. And we kept having conversations about it, say the last year, saying like, how did so many rolls of fabric, how are these all sitting here? And
because in the normal process of producing a collection is that we would have most of the times minimums for manufacturers, and to be able to produce a specific style that we would have, like, let's say 200 units, basically the manufacturer would say, the fabric manufacturer would say, oh, actually our minimum is 1,000 meters, and you would need to buy that to achieve
and
that.
there was this thing of saying like you had, you wanted to sell and you wanted to please retailers, so you'd go with, and you'd risk it, try and guess best sellers, and then you end up with stock, and it was sitting in our studio in London, but also a lot of it was sitting in our manufacturers in Portugal. And because of lockdown, we were in Portugal because we travel here with our girls. And lockdown started to ease, and we thought, okay, we'll just go around the factory, we're just going to collect it all and put it somewhere where we can see it. And then suddenly it was like really shouting at us that we've got this pile, and then the feeling of doing it was like making like a a really amazing meal with like leftovers from your fridge, like, you know, that you've turned that into something amazing because it was just there, it was waiting on you, you know. We made it very visible so that it weighed on ourselves enough that we'd had to do something about it.
Yeah, and the problem of stock obviously is it's a massive one. It's become, I mean, it's become huge obviously because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Do you see a way forward for that you can share with other brands and designers of, you know, how are you dealing with that?
I mean, I think with all the remade process, what made us realize that we're actually managing to get rid of that stock. So it will maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, the idea is that it will get to a point that we will be asking other designers or
dream,
manufacturers,
you know,
to actually supply to us to be able to produce a new collection.
to like go and find that stock somewhere else. But I think it's hard to give advice though, because what we're finding out is that everyone has a slightly different supply chain. So there's waste in different areas. Like it could be product stock, or it could be raw material stock, or trim stock. What we're trying to do is like we've always done designer collaborations, and what we said is that collaborations we would do from now on, because again, there was no going back in this way of thinking. We do them as remade. So we've got 2 lined up for this year and next year with quite big, you know, operational companies. And we had to understand where their waste was, and it is sometimes different from us. So, you know, yeah, that's the thing. It might not be raw material, it might be product, it might be on just a certain raw material, it might be on, you know. So I think it's kind of just the advice would be just to kind of do the work yourself to understanding in your supply chain where your issue was. For us, it was literally into finished raw material was our biggest issue because of this issue with minimum order quantities, and kind of, yeah, wrong buys and things like that. But it might be different for other companies, but we're trying to learn more by and understand this more kind of overall.
Right. And I think what is interesting, I mean, you have done a huge amount of research to come up with this manifesto, but what's interesting is that you talk about doing continuous research, you know, that you're not feeling as though there's a set of rules and then you completely understand that this is a constantly evolving situation.
Yeah, it's like I was saying, like, you know, it was still really scary to just put these points, you know, on the screen down. I mean, we had to do it because, like I said, there was no way back. And the only thing we could do at that point, because everything was so overwhelming, that it was just to kind of, okay, if we don't quite know exactly what the, you know, the one trick is, let's at least note down what's important to us and then go forward. And none of these are things, you know, some of the things that we're, you know, doing now or continuously, or most of the things are things that we are kind of proposing to do in the future. So these are things we're saying, these are what we're understanding it's important at the moment. It might change, and that we want to walk towards, and we're going to tell you twice every year how we're getting on, and we're going to tell you whether we hit these targets, whether we managed or whether we failed. And I think in one hand, it's even more important to tell people when we fail, when we said, you know, we haven't been able to find a sustainable silk supplier by the end of 2021 because there's been this issues and then we keep going in this direction. We're going to keep learning more about this because, yeah, going back to this buzzword thing, I think that's the issue, is that too many times it's been said as this, like, look how amazing of a sustainable brand we are and look these good things. And it's maybe more important to say, let's just go into this process, and it's not a finished process. You have to have, you know, and this is not to say you don't take it seriously or you do it half-assed. It's to say the fear of not being correct or 100% correct is worst.
Yeah, it's just not going to stop us from trying. That's the thing. And also hopefully we'll open discussion to people to actually to come to us and say, you know what, actually if you're struggling with this, I'm actually a supplier of blah 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 that I can help, and or I know a lot about this and I can share my knowledge.
What you thought was good, it's actually pretty wrong, so let me tell you how you can do it another way. And we'll readjust and say, okay, we're going to go slightly this way now, and we'll just keep telling. I think the important thing was, we keep it's the accountability, isn't it? So we keep telling people where we are with things.
Yeah. And I think that's something that people have been, designers have traditionally been quite scared of. They've been scared of putting their heads above the parapet in case they get shot down. But you're saying, okay, this is what we're saying, and tell us if we're wrong, or tell us.
Yeah, it's that feeling is very strong, and I think that feeling combined to the hamster wheel of the fast-paced fashion means that a lot of people would just kind of, you just put it on the side because you know you don't want to be called out, or you don't want to be,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of designers, I think what we think is, and I think what we started doing, and Paolo does more of the product side, so correct me if I'm wrong, is you started reading about it and understanding more about these things and doing research, and then there was not a master plan to say, okay, press the start button, we're now doing all these sustainable
No, it's
things.
just because like when I first started researching, it's like, for example, let's use organic cotton because organic cotton is amazing. Oh, but then someone says, oh, but it uses a lot more water and a lot more land, and you're destroying land so
but then it regenerates the land.
So it's just like you are in this constant, and we do have to make decisions at a certain point and just make sure that
Just
we keep
make
our ears open.
It's if if it's going by your desk, lots of fabric samples, and maybe one is a polyester and one is an FSC certified viscose, just go with the viscose, do that decision. You don't have to, no one's going to chop your head for it if it's maybe not the perfect one, and then you go read about it when you have time and do the next one and the next one. I think that's kind of how we're just facing it.
How has it affected your existing supply relationships? Have you had to stop some of those suppliers, or are they kind of on this journey with you?
I think
Well,
most of them are, but
I mean, I'd say some of them like woke us up for that. Like I think, for example, like our denim manufacturer was the first time I heard about circular water use in a denim washing factory. Like they opened up our eyes to that. So yeah,
there is a general trend for sure.
Yeah.
But like just like we said that it is important to keep our eye our brain open to keep having new information. The same thing happens with the suppliers, that they were told that this certification is the best, but then actually it might not be enough, and we just I myself, I'm trying to kind of like learn from them and educating them as well. It's kind of a back and forth.
Yeah. I don't
Engraçado
think
que
we have to think as well that these
portugueses famosos, mas a falar inglês, nota-se logo que são portugueses, o sotaque,
We're getting some funny.
e eles vivem lá.
got their mic on that they shouldn't have.
Yeah. Can everybody turn the mics off? Thanks. Yeah.
I mean, we're just saying like we have to just kind of this is our network for over 10 years. This is not, and they're not gigantic financial. These are people. The man, the guy that does our knitwear, the lady that does like our fabric stuff. It's people.
Rafa,
Very.
olha, salta para aqui.
It's much easier.
Yeah. I think is it Barbara? Sorry, I'm trying to find out. There's an interference. If everybody wouldn't mind putting their mics on mute, it would be great. Thanks. Yeah, and just moving on to so you have an environmental set of commitments and then a social set.
Mm-hmm.
And your social commitments are really rigorous and pretty uncompromising. Yeah. So your number one commitment is equality in the workplace, which, should go without saying, but obviously it really doesn't. And you're saying that everyone should be given equal opportunities, equal work, equal pay, and a living wage.
Yes.
And practicing diverse recruitment. So how are you actually going to do this? Have you taken on additional people to help you?
So not yet. So one of the things I think we mentioned later on is that we're trying to aim for at some point in 2021, hopefully be able to make that financial commitment and get someone on board full time to help us with that. But we've got our network, we've got our tools, we've got Jan has worked with us for ever since MA existed, and she's our legal and financial director, and she's our rigorous legal head on these things that won't let us do it unless it's up to standards, and will help us with the paperwork. A lot of the things that are external, for example, Paolo's kind of, our eyes and ears on the field. He travels around the factories every day and sees everyone. So, and then we've got my dad, who's a health and safety auditor for the textile industry in the north, which with expertise on social responsibility. So we've heard a lot about this, and this is all informal advice, but it's something that we can rely on in terms of kind of guiding the best practice on this thing, basically, and understanding. And also just that the network that kind of opened up our conscious to this, just hearing about these processes and what you can do, the difference between a minimum wage and a living wage, and what the conditions are, and the issues with subcontracts, all of that. It's come from kind of having that really lucky firsthand knowledge coming to us, and we've always relied on informal help to create Marques'Almeida. It's been done with a lot of this help from family and friends and community, and it's not that different now to start with. And I think what we realize as well in a lot of these commitments is they are the hardest, as you were saying, and they are the most the ones you have to dig deeper and make sure that it's really up to scratch legally. So they're the ones that have longer lead times. So we're saying, mid 2022 or end of 2022, because we realize also in a lot of these things, we really need to learn. We really need to research and understand, how we're going to do this in a way that's responsible and that addresses the kind of the weight and the severity of some of the issues we're talking about here. So like I said, this is a commitment that we're making to the things that are important to us and the journey that we're going to go get to reach them. And some things are going to take longer than others, for sure. And this whole social responsibility side is probably one of the most challenging.
Yeah. And when you talk about your factories, they are in Portugal.
Yeah, all of them. We've got we did a bunch of things outside Portugal in the beginning, but we've seen, I think, after a few years, moved to kind of just working 100% in Portugal.
Yeah. One of the points that stood out really for me was that you're demanding zero tolerance for non-transparency on decent working conditions and pay on subcontracts.
Yeah, on subcontracts, yeah.
Which obviously, subcontracting is something that a lot of brands, claim they don't know about. They hide behind subcontracts.
Exactly.
Is that a big challenge?
It's one of these things that we feel like we know a fair bit about just by being around. Again, we have to say we're talking about really kind of small scale manufacturing in our case.
And also we used to have just a development studio in London, and all the production was kind of managed from London. At the moment, we also have a production studio in Portugal and development in Portugal, which allow us to keep regular visits to the manufacturers, and therefore
so we're understanding more about
we understand a lot more, and we also have visibility where things are being done by who, when, and how fast or slow.
Quality control, and we know, we're paying visits. We know we've got a relationship. We've got a great production manager that's got really good relationships. And then they're very human relationships. They're very skilled. So it will hopefully means that we want to do this whole issue with subcontracts is a very sensitive one and a very difficult one, and I think. Hopefully it might be me being naive, but we want to do it in a sense of a partnership and understanding, who's working with who and how that's coming about, and how we can get to this point where we know for sure that, again, we have zero tolerance on non-transparency. We know everything that's happening. We know where everything's coming from, and how people are working externally to our collaborators.
Yeah, because we invested so much in this local production that it really allows us to, if something it's not being produced where it was supposed to be, we will have visibility on that, and we can ask, okay, where is this being produced? I want to see it, and I want to see who's doing it and how is doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it easier that we're not doing, we're not talking about doing this with something kind of, overseas or in the Far East or something, which I'd guess it's a much bigger challenge.
Yeah, but you are extending this zero tolerance on transparency to all the tiers of your production, from manufacturers of the finished goods to the dyers.
Initially, we'd have to go through manufacturing, and then we'd start disclosing the kind of the tiers below it. Exactly.
Yeah. And in the ideal scenario, what we're trying to do and focus now is also that we are trying to make sure that even the raw materials are actually produced locally. Yeah,
we've been thinking that, realizing that that's actually possible, which we didn't think.
And we're focusing on, at least for now, what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to focus on our main sellers, for example, and to make sure that I tackle the most important ones.
Because also our collections have gotten much smaller. With this awareness of not overproducing or putting too much product out there, so it means, like Paolo was saying, we're really focusing on a tighter group that we can have transparency and visibility on.
So have you reduced the volumes of what you're producing?
Yeah, I think we were coming to a point where our collections were way too big. And it came from this kind of hamster wheel of doing more and more seasons. Well, I think for like the past 2 or 3 years, we've been struggling with this. And we went to, 2 seasons to 3 seasons, and then do we do a 4th? But it's, it takes a toll on everyone involved, the team, the external collaborators. It made no sense. So we went back to 3, then 2, and there was still 2 very big ones, because you have this thing as a young brand that you want to satisfy this demand and please.
That's where our social responsibility starts.
Yeah,
because everyone is being overworked.
Yeah,
right.
So we reduced the amount of styles in our collections dramatically, and also it allows us to do a remade, for example, which we couldn't have done if we were doing huge collections that we were doing before, that, a lot of samples would not even go to sales. And then from sales on, a lot of them would never even be produced. So it was just, it was just kind of an oversampling, overproducing.
Yeah.
And now it gives us time to focus, really understand, like Paolo was saying, like how, if it's 10 fabric groups or 15 for a team of like 2 or 3 people, really focusing on that, it will be really hard to understand where everything comes from, right? But if we're talking about maybe a group of 3 or 4 core fabrics that we use a lot of, and then we know it works, then maybe we can, maybe that's a task we can tackle.
Right. And this all feeds into the foundation that you've launched. Can you tell us a little bit how that works and how that's part of this whole new ecosystem that you've created?
It's very, very recent. So the foundation is something I feel like I've probably discussed in one of these. So what Paolo was saying earlier, that we wanted to find out how you make these traditional rugs that we kept seeing everywhere. And then, we go to the countryside here in Portugal, and there's a fair market that sells similar rugs. So we talked to that man, and that man, put us on the phone with this lady that does these rugs. And, we managed to track her down somewhere. She's actually in Povo, where we have our studio. And it was while we were there, and I'm working with my sister on curating the magazine, and a couple of our friends that are creatives as well. And one of the girls has quite good experience with doing workshops in foreign countries where she's been, and really a passion for this kind of local craft. And by chatting while we were there, looking at the lady, weaving the rug in this like manual loom, we're saying, like, how amazing it would be if that's just what we do. If we go around, find these, people, understand this traditional techniques and crafts, and like all the patrimony that comes with it, and then create these moments, these kind of workshop moments or sharing moments where we empower these groups of people and this patrimony.
Or if we manage to add new designs that will reinvent this product and
keep this craft long lasting. So that's what the foundation it's hopefully going to be. It's going to be. It came, I think, from the understanding as well that we are in communities where you just go, you make your studio there, but are you really aware of what's going on around you? Is it not interesting to know if you're talking about how amazing it is that you have this traditional techniques, then go next door, because there might be someone that does, you know, this or that, or go in the local town museum, because you'll know that there's these, the first thing we found is these kind of like traditional knit jumpers that are knitted by women, and they were typically worn by fishermen. It's like this very thick woolly knit with these symbols. And there were groups in the museum of, you know, ladies that got in, some retired or unemployed, or, you know, that wanted to kind of build skills that did those things.
And preserve.
And how, you know, if you start doing this and you're helping preserve that, and you're empowering this group of people by, you know, paying them fairly for the work, by a lot of times kind of building up their skills, which will help with employment, because we're trying to work with the town hall and these, you know, groups of people that are in the situation of where they want to build their skills to be able to get employment. So
it is a work in progress, but we just thought there was room there to do something that could be quite interesting. And
so we're going to start, I mean, obviously COVID has been a pain in the ass to do this, as it's been with a lot of other things. So we're starting in kind of like a very one-to-one, more kind of research method, where we're finding out all these techniques. We're going to try and map them out and, you know, understand where these things are, where they come from, who does them, so that we can then start organizing more like large scale workshops and gather funding and all of that.
So it sounds as though you're really focusing much more locally now. Are you planning on staying in Portugal?
We're going back and forth with it. We came in March with the bag for 3 weeks and we haven't left. It's been a really good thing, and it's been a really benefit in terms of that, in terms of being close to, I mean, we, more you than me, but like if we look at like 8 years ago, we've always traveled between London and Portugal. So we'd be like in London for 2 or 3 months, and then for a month and a half in Portugal, and then, you know, back and forth. But in the beginning, we would spend the whole time traveling around the factories, you know, helping the people fold the clothes and put the packages. You know, we shipped most of the first orders from my grandmother's garage, because we didn't have a warehouse. So we'd be here and we'd do a lot more things locally and have this contact. And it really helped us when we came back and doing Remade, because again, Remade we wouldn't be able to do that first if we weren't here to actually go around and pick up rolls of fabrics from our manufacturers that were sitting there for years, and physically gather them all in one place and look at them and understand the reality of the situation and what creative we could do with it. And also because we had to work with the local team about creating this like really intricate patchwork pieces that everyone will get calculating how much we're going to need of each fabric to fulfill orders, when we sometimes only had 8 meters of one fabric and that garment had 10 different fabrics in it. The closeness really helped with that, and I think that was really motivated us.
That was one of the things that was really complicated with Remade, is that everything was limited to the existing stock. So it was very mathematic the way that we would build a garment with that specific piece of fabric, because that's only like 5 meters, but then there's the other one that's like 200 meters. And then we need to make sure that we use that in just a tiny pocket or something like that.
And it's not something you can communicate in an email.
You open what Marta was trying to say, is that it just opened our eyes that making everything local and us being a lot more involved here allow us to have a lot more visibility on what really happens, instead of just going through
and allows us to do more challenging different things, rather than just keep the same processes going.
Okay. We're running out of time. I've got 2 more questions. You pledge, as I think one of your final points in the manifesto, to pass it on and share your knowledge. This is really crucial. I think that you are really open to sharing what you learn with anybody else who wants to learn it too. Why did you think this is so important?
I think it's the only way to do it, isn't it? Is doing it with the community. And I think because we have that feeling of like we know nothing about this, you know, it's very complicated. We just want to try, you know, we know what's important for us that we reach.
And
but
I'm very
really
grateful
difficult.
to whoever actually ever shared something with us in
the
terms of
first
knowledge in the
place,
first place. So I think that's the only way that we could pay back.
And I think it's through doing things like what we did this fashion week, where we said, no, we're not going to release another collection. We're not going to talk about product or this kind of like soulless product, where we need to change the conversation a bit and talk about something else, talk about something that's meaningful, because it's really scary, I think, and we hyperventilate a bit, that just to think that lockdown, you know, this pandemic is gonna, you know, dwindle off, which is great, but then we're all gonna, in a blink of an eye, be back to normal, you know, with the same amount of shows and the same amount of collections being produced and the same issues being ignored. And you know, it's very scary. So I think the only thing you can do is kind of open up the conversation as much as you can to kind of gather more and more people. And I think what we really wanted also to have as a message for this talk, and to whoever's listening, to say it's okay, you're not going to be, it's not going to be 100% perfect, you know, it's just try and be ready to be corrected and learn with it. And it's not look how amazing we do this and how perfect this is. It's let's try and make it better and learn with each other and go in a process that is transparent, hence fallible. But that's okay.
Yeah, I guess at the moment we just don't believe there's a specific set of rules that would achieve perfection.
Again, if someone does have them, please.
If someone has, we're more than welcome to share. But yeah, at the moment I don't believe there's a specific set of rules. So it's really important that we just keep studying and keep learning from it.
Yeah, I think keeping on learning. I think that's a brilliant point to end on. And we're really looking forward to catching up with you, maybe on a regular basis, to hear about your progress.
Yes, definitely.
That would be amazing.
That would be the key thing. I now feel like, you know, we've got a lot of sitting down and organizing to do, and we're kind of looking forward to see where we are 6 months from now.
Yeah, well, I wish you absolutely all good luck with that, and thank you so much for being so forensic, I think, in your commitments on the manifesto, and for sharing this with us today.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the work that you do, because we've always been, you know, paying attention is one of the things that was, you know, big motivators and big inspirations in trying to do what we do. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for having us on board.
Great. And just one last thing, sorry, we didn't have time for questions from the audience, but please go over to Marques'Almeida's Instagram and you can ask any questions there. And likewise, you know, chat with us on Fashion Open Studio. We always like to hear from you, and love to hear your feedback on all of this. Great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was just wonderful. It reminded me of when I had a brand, but just so beautiful. Thank you.
Did you have a brand? Really? I didn't know about that.
We did, closed it ages ago, but we did. I mean, you were just telling stories that were really, really familiar, that I could really understand, but from a now standpoint. And I don't know, I mean, just thank you. It's been a really lovely afternoon. It's been lovely to listen.
Thank you very much. It was really good. And we'll keep talking in anything you need.
Yes, we keep talking, absolutely. Well, relax and refresh, and when you're ready, we're gonna follow up this conversation. Thank you very much, both of you.
The grandmother of her duties. See you later, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone.